You're mad they cast black actors to portray House Valyrian. I'm mad they still refuse to give them purple eyes. We are not the same. On that controversial note, let's discuss the biggest and most personally aggravating visual changes that HBO's adaptations have done to massacre George Martin's books. Valyrians are supposed to look kinda weird. Not ugly, mind you, but a striking, inhuman beauty. George Martin said he wanted Valyrians to be a race apart, with distinctive features from the rest of the Westerosi. Most notably, the silver hair and purple eyes, but also fine chiseled aristocratic features. Typically, this means long, thin noses, sharp jawlines, strong defined chins, high cheekbones, etc. I'm not denigrating HBO for being unable to stick to these features for every Valyrian they've cast. After all, I believe physical resemblance is only third most important when adapting a character for the screen, behind acting ability and marketability. No, Fia Saban doesn't have a particularly long nose or prominent chin, but she's a fantastic actor. Matt Smith does actually look kinda weird and aristocratic, but he was cast for his acting chops. Have you seen him in The Crown? Oh my.
Right now, I am currently outranked by my 8-year-old son.
Oh, yes, of course, he's the heir to the throne.
I am his father, Elizabeth.
And because he's a huge star, HBO could market the show around. So that's all fine. But come on people, this looks so much cooler than this. In 2010, they tried doing colored contacts with Tamsin Merchant for the unaired Game of Thrones pilot, and even for Tyrion. But apparently, to be wearing colored contact lenses every day you shoot is a nightmare. By the time Emilia Clarke replaced Merchant, they didn't even bother. I can respect this as a filmmaking practicality, but to be quite honest, there were only 2 Targaryens in the show for 6 episodes, and then only 1 for the rest of the way. I would have appreciated the use of visual effects to correct Dany's eyes. That's the sort of attention to detail for the sake of world building and whimsy that I adore. And don't tell me the CGI wasn't possible in 2011. Here's a low-budget BBC adaptation of Gormenghast, and Titus Groan has purple eyes here. And even if these are contacts, certainly these are not. They're not giving an infant colored contacts. So the tech was there 11 years before Game of Thrones. From one horrifically dorky complaint to another, the castles are all wrong. Just outside the massive granite walls of Winterfell sits Winter Town. This is a log and stone village filled with homes and markets and taverns. The townspeople congregate there during winters to stay warm, but most of the houses are empty during the summer. When Robb Stark marched south to rescue his father, the folks of Wintertown cheered for their lord's heir. But in Game of Thrones, Winterfell is a lonely, desolate, flat-looking castle in the middle of nowhere. Where is the life and whimsy? Where is the cozy little castle town? Casterly Rock is just depressing in Game of Thrones. So depressing that George himself went bloggo mode about it 5 years after it aired on TV. His real-life inspiration was the Rock of Gibraltar on the Iberian Peninsula, a 1,400-foot tall mountain of limestone. That's double the height of the wall. Here are the real measurements for the Rock of Gibraltar, and here are the measurements of Casterly Rock. This painting by fantasy artist legend Ted Nasmith is, according to George, the most accurate depiction. Notice how the tiny tower up top is the only structure above the mountain. That's where the maesters keep all their ravens. And now compare that to Game of Thrones. They didn't even try. The castle of Casterly Rock is supposed to be inside the mountain, not above it. But I guess HBO thought their audience was too dumb to infer that, so they put the ugliest castle I've quite honestly ever seen right on top of a flaccid-looking cliff, not a 2,100-foot tall mountain like George's Rock, or even the 1,400-foot tall Gibraltar. And if you think Highgarden looks similar, that's because HBO got lazy. They used Almodovar Castle in Spain as the filming location for both the interior of Casterly Rock and all of Highgarden. The battlements of Casterly Rock are Trujillo Castle, also in Spain, and the exterior is just some shoddy, generic CGI. Almodovar Castle makes a decent Highgarden, except here's the official Ted Nasmith version. Obviously, this isn't entirely practical for TV. but I'd have loved a little more effort to be put in via some CGI trees and hedges and flower gardens, etc. Color isn't going to kill you, David Benioff and Dan Weiss. Moat Cailin is egregiously wrong as well. The moat is massive, once comprised of 20 towers, a wooden keep, and a wall as tall as Winterfell's. Of course, most of that wall has sunk, and only 3 of those 20 towers remain, but the point is, its footprint is huge. Huge enough that Northern lords were seriously urging King Torrhen Stark to use the dilapidated stronghold to fend off Aegon Targaryen. It wouldn't have worked, but that's the sort of confidence they had in Moat Cailin. In Game of Thrones, all we can see is a ramshackle pile of lumber. I guess this is the wooden keep, but we don't see any of the surrounding stone and basalt ruins, and none of the 3 remaining towers. The whole structure is hardly bigger than one of Winterfell's towers. Falling in line with, or perhaps even spearheading, the 2010s trend of muted color palettes as a means of portraying a gritty mood, Game of Thrones is a whole different vibe from A Song of Ice and Fire. I'll talk about the broader color choices in a sec, but this problem is very noticeable in characters' clothing. Have you noticed every northern soldier wearing the same ugly brown boiled leather? They had armor up there, you know. Here's some official artwork of Ned and his soldiers, in full Stark regalia. Speaking of Northerners, Roose Bolton is missing his creepy cloak, pale pink fabric with red spots to mimic blood, trimmed with white fur. Here's a great fan art of Roose cleaning his dagger. The bright color he wears emits a subtext of ironic visual storytelling. Despite the pink cape and pink gloves, Roose Bolton isn't about to go dancing. He's about to flay these nice folks alive. In Game of Thrones, Roose wears black leather over black chainmail. His panties are probably black too. Another inaccuracy is Dany's dress in Qarth. Qarthine women wear gowns which leave one breast bare, and in order to ingratiate herself with Qarthine culture, Dany wears one too. It's probably for the best that Emilia Clarke didn't have to constantly walk around set with a boob hanging out, but the audience misses this facet of her character, willing to do something very embarrassing, uncomfortable, and foreign to herself to show respect to another culture and earn their trust, something her brother Viserys would never do.
This stinks of manure!
I'm not actually mad at HBO for omitting the Qarthine gown. I'm just saying this was in the books if you didn't know. George really likes boobs. I am mad that HBO didn't care about crowns. They're adapting a story about kings and queens vying for the Iron Throne. You know what's the most obvious iconography of a king or a queen? Their crown. They got all mixed up. They covered Dany's boob and left Robb's head bare. In the books, Lord Hoster Tully Smith forges Robb's crown, modeled after the ancient crown of the Stark Kings of Winter. A circlet of hammered bronze adorned with First Men runes, topped by 9 iron spikes to resemble swords. How much cooler would this scene look if Robb was wearing his crown? I could, and probably should, make a whole video about how badly the writers misunderstood and misadapted Stannis. But their worst offense was omitting his crown too. After accepting the Lord of Light into his life, Stannis wears a crown of red gold, with points fashioned into flames. There's actually 2 of them, one for Queen Selyse as well. Here's an officially commissioned look at Stannis' crown made into a barbute for battle. Look at all this color. Look at Lightbringer glowing. Did you know that Stannis' introductory scene is the first and last time we ever see Lightbringer? Too much magic and whimsy for my fantasy series. The worst transgression was Daenerys' crown. In Qarth, the merchant guild called the Tourmaline Brotherhood gifted Dany a beautiful circlet of yellow gold and silver, depicting the 3 heads of her dragons in onyx for Drogon, jade for Rhaegal, and ivory for Viserion. This is an iconic part of Dany's character in the books, and she still wears this crown all the way in Book 5 as Queen of Meereen, and she'll probably continue to wear it after she arrives in Westeros. It actually becomes a part of her characterization. She recalls hearing about one of her ancestors named Aegon, who said a crown should never sit easy on the head. But I suppose Game of Thrones was never interested in making Dany the well-intentioned, humble queen that she is in the books. Brown, gray, mud, slate, Sienna, beige, pewter, puke. This is what it would look like if you could jump through the pages of a Game of Thrones, not this. I understand HBO's vision. They wanted to match the gritty, violent, often desolate atmosphere of the books with a dark, gritty color palette. It's also cheaper if every character wears the same outfit. But A Song of Ice and Fire exists within a high fantasy atmosphere, in George Martin's own words. High fantasy is a term coined by fantasy author Lloyd Alexander in 1971. He says high fantasy merges with literature because each work of art in its own way suggests a possible attitude towards life, a variety of lifestyles, ways of seeing ourselves and others. In other words, the story demands complexity. One of my favorite examples of this from George's books is Stannis Baratheon. Melisandre sees him as Azor Ahai reborn, and sees herself as a champion of R'hllor who must make Stannis see what she sees. Stannis sees himself primarily as the rightful king, shackled by the duties he has to the realm and his family. He accepts Melisandre, concedes so much to her because her magic appears to work, but even still, Stannis is reluctant to give up his bastard nephew, Edric Storm, to the fires. It causes him turmoil, caught between family and duty. But we lose this turmoil, this way of Stannis seeing himself, in Alexander's words, by Game of Thrones replacing Edric Storm with Gendry so we could have another naked woman scene, and by Stannis never opposing Melisandre's urge to burn him alive. It's actually very callous how Stannis treats Gendry in the show.
Then why bathe him and dress him in fine clothes? If it needs to be done, do it. Don't torture the boy.
If it needs to be done, do it. Compare that with the turmoil Stannis had over Edric in the books, and we can see where this element of high fantasy is lost in the show. Another example is Davos attacking Melisandre after the Blackwater. Here's Davos' attitude towards life, delivering justice and doing right by the people he loves. His way of seeing Melisandre is, essentially, a villain, a succubus influencing Stannis to commit horrible crimes. He sees himself as honor-bound to save his king from this evil red woman, so he tries to kill her. And, perhaps most importantly, Davos tries to kill Mel because 4 of his sons died on the Blackwater. She gave them to the flames, Davos says. He's wrong, of course, since the fire was Tyrion's idea, but at least that's real, imperfect, human emotion. This is another tenet of high fantasy, according to Alexander. It quickens the heart and reaches levels of emotion, areas of feeling, that no other form touches in quite the same way. In Game of Thrones, Davos attacks Melisandre because she burned infidels alive and was, according to Davos, leading Stannis astray.
And burning men alive. What? They built a great fire when Stannis returned. All those who spoke against her, she called servants of darkness.
I have to stop her.
You got a negative attitude. That's what's stopping you.
Her callback to telling Davos' son Mathos that death by fire is the purest form of death.
Death by fire is the purest death.
Is what prompts Davos to try to stab her. The subtext is there, but Davos never accuses her of killing his son, his only son in the show. And when, many seasons later, Davos meets Tyrion, he happily rows to King's Landing with the man who did kill his son. This sort of illogical emotion, or lack thereof, spits in the face of what high fantasy should be. Here's Davos' chance to confront the man who killed his son. And nothing. Back to visual issues, HBO did a completely lackluster job with its 2 most fantasy iconography in the fantasy series they were adapting, White Walkers and Dragons. In the books, the others are strange, beautiful, inhuman, elegant, and dangerous, according to the author. Their armor is supposed to be reflective and camouflage, drinking in the surrounding color like the surface of a pond. Here's what they look like in Game of Thrones. Spooky, yes, but not elegantly dangerous. And I don't even know what to say about this. The dragons, 3 of them, are all the same color. Given that they're computer generated anyways, could they not simply make Rhaegal green and Viserion whitish? I mean, can you guess who this is? How about him? They were both Rhaegal. In terms of overall aesthetic, I always saw A Song of Ice and Fire being closer to a movie like Excalibur, a dark fantasy King Arthur film from 1981. This was shot on film, obviously, but the vibrant colors and glowing halation give this effect of a world apart from our own. Look at this duel between Lancelot and Garwin. It's even smaller scale than the hands tourney from Season 1, but that blood spatter on shining silver armor, the way the forest is reflected on his helm, the splash of color when we cut to the ladies in attendance, the huge golden statue in the background to create depth within the frame. Game of Thrones, and House of the Dragon at times, looks drab by comparison, and I think that's a shame. In the end, these complaints are far less important than the actual story and plot issues I have talked about a lot on this channel. So let me know down in the comments how you imagine the world of Westeros. Which visual elements of the show do you hate or love? Thanks for watching and subscribing.